where's that up to?
So that's Article 22.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right, hello everybody, and welcome to the meeting of the West Yorkshire Police and Crime Panel. My name is Councillor Al Garthwaite, and I'm the chair of the panel. And before we go further, I'd like to go around so that everyone has a chance to introduce themselves, starting with yourself.
Councillor Sack, Presidency of Bradford.
Councillor Robert Palmer, Caldale.
Councillor O'Malley, Wakefield Council.
Councillor Andrew Cooper, Kirkland.
Councillor Lauren Tennant, King, Wakefield Council.
Jo Sykes, independent member.
Catherine Hankinson, temporary deputy chief constable.
John Roberts, Chief Constable, West Yorkshire Police.
Wendy Stevens, research manager, support for the mayor.
Tracy Bowden, the Mayor of West Yorkshire. Alice Lower, Deputy Mayor.
Alan Rees, Director of Strategy, Comms and Policing at the West Yorkshire Combined Authority.
Trevor Lake, independent member.
Councillor Amanda Carter at Leeds.
Councillor Mohan Sokal from Kirklees. This is my first meeting here. Thank you.
Councillor Anthony Smith, Kirklees.
Sharon Fraser from Wakefield Council, Legal Advisor to Panel.
And Samantha Wilkinson, Police and Crime Panel Officer. Thank you. We do have some apologies for absence. We have Councillors Courtney, Sullivan and Councillor Sharp. Thank you. So for our first item, we need to, moving to item number 2, we need to approve the minutes from our last meeting in July. We were due to have a meeting in September, but as everyone will remember, we couldn't do that because Her Majesty the Queen died the day before the meeting, so we agreed to not have that meeting on that date. So, moving to the minutes of the last meeting, we did have various questions, and if you'll just bear with me, I'll find the minutes, sort of the minutes. Here we are. So, looking at item 5.9, sorry about this. There's so many papers. There wasn't anything to raise, no.
Shall I move them, Chair?
Yes.
Shall I move the minutes?
Please do. Thank you. We usually do have questions, so I'm surprised that we didn't. Thank you. So, going on to the Mayor's annual report.
Sorry, Chair, I don't think you weren't at the meeting.
Sorry, the sound is quite hard.
No, sorry.
Sorry, Jo wasn't at the meeting, so she can't move them. So I'm quite happy to do that.
Out. Would someone who was at the meeting like to move?
I'm quite happy to
please? Thank you. And someone to second that?
I'll second.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for pointing that out. The Mayor's annual report. Do you want to say anything about it before we proceed to questions?
It's at your will, Chair, whatever you'd like. I do have some notes, but it's whatever you'd like.
If you'd like to... I'm sorry. We've missed out a couple of items.
I thought so, that's fine.
Whether there are any urgent items that we wish the panel might need to consider. No. And do members have any declarations of interest? No? Fine. So now we can move to the annual report. Please do give your introduction, and then we do have various questions.
Lovely, that's grand, thank you. Thank you for the invitation today to be here and for the work that you do scrutinising and holding us all to account. It's very welcome. Right, the annual report. So following the postponed panel meeting of September, as the Chair said, we received feedback on the draft annual report. I'm really, really grateful for your input, and the requests for additional material have been included, so hopefully that will be a response to some of your questions on the police's work with antisocial behaviour and road safety, the way that we influence holding the Chief Constable to account through the DQs and the comms meeting, how we address weaker performance, and addition of more illustrative case studies. And you'll see that the VRU paper also has some of those interventions in detail. So we still welcome feedback always. That it's not the end of the process. So please do feel free to comment. If we could start with item 6, which is the Oh, fair enough. Yep. The report. Yeah. Thank you very much, Wendy. Please, go ahead, Chair. Any questions?
With the report?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
We have to be quick here, you see. We're too fast, we move on through the schedule.
Yes, very true. So, I can have the report. We did have a question on several questions about looking to page 30 of the report.
I think that was me, Chair. I'm quite happy for it to be taken offline, but halfway down the section on the mayoral pledge, it's the third paragraph, third line, talks about the increase in officers from ethnic minority backgrounds as a baseline of 7.5.
Yep.
I think that's wrong. That's where we are.
No, it was 6.3.
It's 6 or 6.3.
It was 6.3. I remember it. Yeah, 6.3 is the
So you might
baseline.
just want to,
Eagle-eyed, thank you so much, that's really well.
So we look better.
Yeah, it will look better,
well, I
thank
can
you.
say you've done a good job with it. I think you want to get that
Celebrate
across.
that, thank you.
Yes. Thank you. Yes, that was a question of fact, wasn't it? So, going back to page 8, we had a question on restorative justice.
Thank you. It's regarding, page 8, is restorative justice. I know it's been a successful year with so many, about 7,000 referrals, leading to 1,500 restorative conversations, and the satisfaction between victims and offenders is pretty high. Is there any figures of offenders that took part in the scheme that ended up still re-offending? In other words, it's sort of to look at whether or not the successfulness of it.
Yeah. Can I say this programme is, as you say, really, really successful, and I think it helps a lot of people come to terms with what happened to them and why things happened, and that's what we want as well, is to find peace for victims and family members of victims. So I think it's a fantastic programme. Wendy, we don't have that data, do we?
No, it's not something we've looked at
Or we collect?
or we collect at the moment.
I think it's a good question. I think we should have a look at it. We
Good
can
challenge,
extract it,
yeah.
We'll give it to you.
Yeah, because we know that the victims and survivors are very satisfied, but whether that then means that people don't re-offend because they understand what they've done, it's a good challenge. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair.
Councillor Smith?
I think there was also a comment about the wording of that as well. In
There was.
97% of offenders, maybe a bit better phrased as 97% of participating offenders. Just to avoid any confusion.
What page is that on?
So same page 8, restorative
And the
justice.
second line up for restorative justice. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that. It's always very satisfactory to see how closely panel members scrutinise the report and everything that's written in it.
That's why we're always terrified coming here, because we know that you've read the papers and you're on top of all the detail.
Yes, don't be terrified.
I know, I jest.
It's, a lot of what he says is extremely satisfactory and shows how well you are performing, supervising and making sure that you stick to the terms of practice and right. But of course, there's always room for things. Councillor Cooper.
Yeah, on page 20, the safer roads and transport networks. You mentioned the West Yorkshire Vision Zero. Given that road traffic accidents, there's an awful lot of people in terms of serious injuries are young men. What specifically have you got there in terms of involving the Zero Board in tackling young men and having links with education and other organisations so we can reach those people?
Yes, thank you, Andrea. Well, as Alison is the chair of the board, maybe you can answer that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Vision Zero board is a high-level strategic board that brings together activity from all 5 areas of West Yorkshire, and we work really closely with the Strategic Roads Executive, a body chaired by Bradford Council, as you know, although currently leads because Julian has left. And that means that all the 5 highways directors are working alongside politicians, because the Vision Zero board is a political forum, because there wasn't that political buy-in, as you remember, in the past, and that was part of the reason why the public and councillors felt that the ability to influence was reduced. So we brought that political influence, that oversight, to first of all lay out our stall in terms of Vision Zero strategy. So now all 5 local authorities are very close to completing their Vision Zero strategies. I think Leeds has gone to the exec board. Bradford is close to completing their Vision Zero strategy. I went to Bradford's exec board. Calderdale's very near the end. And once we've got those strategies, which are all under that Vision Zero umbrella, we can have within that metrics, we can have within that activity, including campaigning, including education. But it's not for the board itself to do that work, it's the board to set out those performance expectations, and then for the local authorities to do that as one in unison as part of their local strategies. And what is really good about the Vision Zero board is that we have lived experience for the first time ever. Yes, BRAKE was always on the Strategic Roads Exec, and they are still on the Vision Zero board. But we've brought in SCARD, which is families of people who have been lost to road death, and we've got an individual who lost his daughter as a result of a speeding motorist. And that lived experience is really powerful in pushing forward the agenda and holding the local authorities to account. And so they're very keen on getting their voices out there, and they want to be part of the campaigns and the education that will follow once the strategies have been agreed by the local authorities.
Sorry, you didn't mention Kirk Leeds, you mentioned all the authorities, I think, but obviously, you know.
Yeah, no, well, I think Kirklees and Wakefield, they're writing their strategies, but they're a little bit further behind than the other 3 that I've mentioned. It's not that they're not writing them, but there's a huge consultation exercise with the public that has to take place. So, yeah, they're fast on the heels, but they're not quite at the same stage as Leeds. I think theirs is complete. Bradford, it's nearly there, and Calderdale is nearly there.
Over to you,
So you need to raise that back in your local
yes,
authority.
so get back to Kirklees and cheer them along.
Chair, can I just add to what the Deputy Mayor said, to assist with it? Of course, there's all the enforcement activity around roads policing, neighbourhood policing and proactive operations, including in Kirklees. And then there's also the speed awareness courses and the driver awareness courses that numerous young men are referred into, and so there's targeting there, and the proactive operations as well are targeting those who cause most harm on the roads, so there is that profile of those involved in most injury accidents. And then look into the future, and I will shamelessly keep talking about this, to educate people of the future. Part of the police education programme, as people come up to driving age, is around safe road use and responsible drivers and the implications of speed drugs, alcohol, distractions on the road as well.
And I should just add, I have forgotten to say that I'm working with Jill Arnold, who's the head of the bench in Bradford, and she, nothing to do with me, she has led this. She's working with a national insurance provider, who I will not name because it hasn't been signed on the dotted line yet, and they're looking to dramatically reduce insurance premiums for young male drivers in Bradford. But the price of that reduction will be another education awareness course that they will have to undertake. When they've completed it and passed it, then they'll get access to the lower insurance premiums. So we're hoping that that's going to launch early next year, but I don't want to set any hairs running by giving dates and stuff, because I'm not leading that, Jill Arnold's leading that, but it's going to be revolutionary. It's the only one in the country, and other local authorities, I think, are going to be looking to Bradford to see how they're doing it.
I mean, we all know about the black boxes and things that young drivers have, and personally I'd like to see us having a strong link with black boxes.
Yeah, I think black boxes are part of the insurance.
Excellent, good.
Yeah.
Because was it male frontal lobe development in under 25s is much lower, and so that's one of the reasons why road traffic accidents among the young are so much greater. So it's a physiological thing as much as anything else.
Okay, thank you. Moving back to page 30 of the report,
Councillor Carty, you had a question on this.
Yes, thank you. It's in relation to uplifting police numbers. I understand that the safeguarding unit is fully staffed. However, we're still struggling, I think, all over West Yorkshire in neighbourhood policing, although numbers are coming through. I've had assurances that you are starting to put police officers into neighbourhood policing, which obviously is badly needed because they are the eyes and ears of the public. Are you planning to put in, or how are you planning to hold the Chief Constable to account in putting police officers who are experienced or new police officers into neighbourhood policing, or is there going to be a mixture?
Well, inevitably, I mean, the Chief Constable's here, so he might want to...
It's operational to some degree,
Yeah. But obviously, we hold the Chief Constable to account through our community outcomes meetings, and the last of them we had talks about neighbourhood policing. We had a big paper on neighbourhood policing. We regularly talk about the uplift, the recruitments that are coming through the uplift. The issue, of course, is that the PEQF, the recruitment framework through which we get our new police officers, is for young people who want a degree. They go through the 3-year degree course, or if they've got a degree, they go through the 2-year degree course. The starting pay is very low, so by default we get very young people who are not experienced. They spend a lot of time in the classroom. Yes, they spend time on the front line, but they don't get anything like police officers used to get under the old system. We do get a lot of people coming into West Yorkshire who are experienced from other forces, so that there's a really proactive campaign to bring in. That's I saw one on Twitter the other day, urging people from other forces to come into West Yorkshire, and I think we do quite well on that. But we are going to reach a point where a majority of new recruits who are starting on the front line, who have done their 2 or 3 year courses, are newly qualified and are less experienced, and as more people leave after 30 years, we will reach that crisis point, and I think that that's a risk for all forces. But the great news is that we're hoping to team and ladle of those with some of the more experienced officers and the officers that are transferring in from other areas. I don't know if you want to say more, John.
Just before you do, Wendy's just reminded us that there is a paper coming to panel on this very topic. Which will be very useful. In November. Sorry.
No, I share the operational passion with everybody else on the police and crime panel around neighbourhood policing. I've said it before and I'll say it again, we were one of the few forces to maintain neighbourhood policing throughout the last 12 years of the recession, and we have proportionally far more PCSOs than many other forces in the country. However, we all know there has been a reduction, and that's been the harsh reality of the cuts and the changes. To answer your question specifically, it is experienced officers who go into neighbourhood policing. Most of the areas are up to strength, but there is a real practical balance between bringing through the new trainees and student officers, as the Deputy Mayor's referred to, and allowing them to develop through the patrol teams to then get on with the policing teams. So the Deputy and other people monitor it and do look at it, and we'll see the numbers in the paper, hopefully. The good news going forward is whilst the PEQF Student Officer Training Scheme, the Police Educational Qualification Foundation Scheme going forward, is longer, they're coming to the point now, the first tranches, where they have to choose between investigative approach around crime and safeguarding, a response approach around domestic abuse, safeguarding people in emergency situations, and neighbourhood policing. So I think in the future we will develop an even stronger, determined, resolute or passionate group of people who spend longer training into neighbourhood policing. What we don't do, which is what we used to do, is play any form of numbers game where we post student officers who don't know what they're doing into neighbourhood policing. They'll do the core training and they'll choose a pathway, and one of those is neighbourhood policing, because that's how strongly we feel about it.
And if it's useful to know, to just remind the panel that there is still plans from the BSIP funding on bus reform to have extra PCSOs dedicated to bus stations and buses, and that is really, I think, where a lot of the great community work is going to happen, because buses are a hub for our community to pass through. So I'm hoping that those PCSOs will be an additional asset to us as well.
Yeah, funded by the Mayor.
So it was a decision that I took because I could see that the transport police on trains do have a really valuable role. We didn't have an equivalent on buses, and I wanted the bus network to be safe for women and girls, and obviously for young people as well, so more people would use it to help me with my plan to transform the bus network, and the extra PCSOs will be shared across the region.
We'll be very pleased to hear that in Pudsey, Mayor.
Yeah. Obviously, the deployment goes to where the risk is as well. So for some people, they may feel unsafe, but actually their community is not as unsafe as maybe others. So that is obviously an operational decision for the chief where people go.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. There's no additional information in the report explaining how the Chief Constable is held to account for operational activity, other than a brief reference at the top of page 29. Is there scope for this to be expanded? Yeah?
Yes, of course.
Thank you.
Of course. I think we're never out of your diary, but very happy to do that.
That's great. Now on page 31, the report refers to performance challenges, but there isn't really any explanation given as to how these might be addressed. So what are you doing to ensure that these are tackled?
Okay, so just looking at them, the number of early guilty pleas has fallen, increase in number of homicides and serious road traffic collisions. I don't know if you want to take this on, Alison?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, some of the activity that's in the main body of the report is in response to some of these challenges. The work that we're doing with the local criminal justice boards, for example, because the early guilty pleas is a partnership approach. It's not the police heavying people through interrogation, forcing them to plead guilty. It's the whole process that's part of that, and obviously that's one of the things that I do through the local criminal justice board. At the end of the day, we've got a justice process that allows people to plead guilty if they want to, and if they don't, then they go through the court process. The increase in the number of homicides, there's a homicide strategy. There's a national homicide strategy, and then West Yorkshire's got their own homicide strategy which they're working towards, and obviously they do that in partnership with Opgem, LOC, VRU, because all roads lead to Rome. We want to prevent people from dying through the various methodologies, and the violence against women and girls agenda, of course, everything is about keeping people safe. So it's not explicitly said, but the focus of the work that we're doing is about delivering against the challenges that we've identified the serious road traffic collisions. Obviously, Vision Zero is the vehicle, pardon the pun, through which we're seeking to eliminate road deaths and serious injury. And reduction in victim satisfaction. So that's a whole range of work that we're doing. So the violence against women and girls work is a major part of that. There's a lot of work that we're doing on race, for example, because we know that victim satisfaction amongst black communities has always traditionally been worse than that of white communities. You won't know, and I don't know if it's public, but it is now. West Yorkshire is working really closely with the Race Action Plan team to identify best practice that they can take forward, so that West Yorkshire is going to be one of the forces that lead on working better with our communities. And that includes things like looking at our stop and search, looking at how we can improve those race disparities, which I obviously lead on nationally with the Association of Police and Crime Commissioners. So that's our work that we're doing. Some of it's referenced in the plan and some of it's not there. And an increase in the number of adult first-time entrants we've talked about several times here, I think. It's a challenge, but it's also an opportunity. So one of the reasons that all partners are increasing the number of young people that they're putting as at risk is because they're trying to prevent them entering the criminal justice system. So there's a whole partnership approach to identifying those young people who are at risk of being exploited or entering the criminal justice system for one reason or another. And from POLED, which we've talked about many times, the police education course that West Yorkshire Police fund, it's very innovative, there isn't another in the country, right up to all the interventions from the Mayor's VRU, the work of Gemlock. All that is about supporting young people, but again it's about our partners in the local criminal justice board, youth justice and probation, all of us working together to get there. So we haven't adumbrated everything in detail because this is about what we've done in the past 12 months. And obviously the police and crime plan outlines what we're doing over a 3-year period, and so I think many of the challenges that have been outlined here are in the plan.
And if I may just add, as Wendy's reminded me, that item 7, the performance monitoring report, that is in response to that challenge.
Oh, absolutely. And I totally take on board that what you've said, that some of these questions are answered in other places, or that they're already known to the panel. But bearing in mind that this is a report that will go out to the public and people who haven't, to community safety partnerships, to people who haven't had necessarily the chance that we've had to know all the detail. It's just really to make it clear, I suppose, that that is something that you are looking at, monitoring, and that the information can be found in different parts of the report. Otherwise, not everyone reads every word. People will go to performance challenges and think, well, hang on, there's nothing said about how you're addressing them. So it doesn't need to be repeated. Information that's already there doesn't need to be repeated. It's really about how it's written and structured, I think.
That's very
Councillor Carter.
Yeah, and one of the outcomes is a reduction in knife crime. Leeds has had its fair share of knife crime. It's been pretty horrific in parts. Even in Pudsey, in the bus station, we've had some knife crime, which is extremely unpleasant. And I think the public generally don't see that because it doesn't affect most people. What affects most people is somebody breaking into the car or breaking into the house. And I think victim satisfaction, when we get the negative policing numbers up, will start to improve because they'll see more police officers. They don't. Knife crime is much more serious, but they don't see that.
Yeah, and obviously things like burglary, West Yorkshire, it's a big thing at the minute. Our forces saying they're going to go out to every burglary. West Yorkshire already goes out to every burglary.
We're ahead of the game there.
And antisocial behaviour is actually massively down here in West Yorkshire.
We've got pass, haven't we, Chair?
We've talked about it here before. So there are lots of, so I talked about the two main areas that have been affecting trust and confidence nationally, which is women and girls and race. They're the two biggest, but there are lots and lots of other ways that West Yorkshire Police are seeking to maintain that positive relationship with the communities it serves. It's really wide and varied, and clearly the more they diversify into different areas the less focus they can put on the bigger areas, but a different thing is important to every individual, and we have to understand that going forward, the police budgets, even though we're growing the numbers of police officers, police budgets are under some enormous pressure, as we're going to discuss later on, and we need to really get an idea about what we, as a community, as a society, want to focus on and prioritise.
Okay, thank you. I'd just like to ask, are you satisfied with the progress made against the priorities in the Police and Crime Panel over the past year?
Well, I would say there's still challenges, of course there are, but I am satisfied with the direction of travel. I think we have an outstanding police force that is open for challenge and innovation and is very happy to work closely with us. But of course there is, and every day when you read the news and that desperate murder in Kirklees, you know, your heart sinks. You think, what could we have done? Could we have done more in our role? But crime is with us. We have to have that focus on what we want to prioritise. I think we have, with our police and crime plan that has been extensively shared with the public, I think we've got the public with us. That's also part of the conversation. Are the public happy? But there are always things we can do better. Thank you for that question. Alison, do you want to add anything?
Absolutely. I mean, I think in some areas I'm absolutely so proud. Violence against women and girls, I think West Yorkshire Police have been amazing at the way that they've embraced that agenda, the resources they've put in, the pace of change, the innovation. I don't think many people around the table understand some of the creative ways that West Yorkshire Police are working to keep women and girls safe. So the extension of the PSPO in Bradford, they've used that to stop street-based harassment. Nobody else is doing that in the country. Bradford is a safe place because of it, but that was an initiative that West Yorkshire Police brought in partnership with the university and the local authority, using the framework of the Public Spaces Protection Order. Section 60 stop and search. Whilst I have some issues with those in some cases, West Yorkshire Police decided to use Section 60 to search a whole nightclub of people because somebody said that they had been spiked with a needle, and so they were able to use those powers really creatively to search for that needle. And I think there's some amazing stuff going on, some really creative thinking going on, which I'm incredibly proud of. But yes, there's lots more to do, and we've got to understand that the resources are an issue for us if we want to continue the pace of change that we've been achieving.
But part of our role is also to challenge government, to make sure that the voice of West Yorkshire is heard about how much more we could do if we had the resources.
Of course.
Yeah, as always.
Yes, as always. Of course.
Chair, may I just add just a slight technical point of order, and it's a very astute question about are you happy with the progress being made against the police and crime plan? Just a reminder to panel members that you're statutorily responsible for oversight of the police and crime plan. It's not a policing plan. It's a police and crime plan for West Yorkshire, and there's many other agencies involved, like local authorities, community safety partnerships, other criminal justice agencies, and partnerships with other public sector bodies like health, mental health trust, who all affect the plan. And I would invite you to consider in the future around some of those agencies' response and input into these plans, because with the work of the Mayor and the Deputy Mayor and policing we can do so much. It's actually those other agencies that also have a significant input into crime reduction across West Yorkshire.
Absolutely, I quite agree. And of course our very thriving third sector, which contributes so much. Thank you. Thank you. Okay.
Chair,
Carter.
if I may. Thank you, Chief Constable. You just reminded me of something that I did need to ask, and it's surrounding mental health, because so much of crime is based on people with mental health. And it's enormously difficult to engage the NHS when people have got addictions of some description. They don't want to treat them, so we rely on charities like Forward Leeds, and there are other charities around different parts of West Yorkshire. But at some point we need to have a national conversation about how we tackle this, and how we ensure that these people do get the treatment that they need, because the medics at the moment won't touch them, they won't treat them unless they beat their addiction. But they've taken their addicted to something because they've got a problem, they've got a mental health problem. So it's a vicious circle that we can't solve until we have this national conversation. And I do believe that it is right across the country, it's not just West Yorkshire. So I do take every opportunity I can to talk to people who have influence, who can try to get this moving in some way.
No, it's a point well raised. Yeah, it is a challenge. And so much of crime comes from poor mental health and trauma. I think it's only going to get worse, unfortunately, because of the cost of living crisis and people under enormous stress. I think the approach where you have to be clean in order to access housing and other services sort of makes no sense, because you need to be able to get that support. But yeah, it's a point well made.
And to be fair to government, we are receiving £38 million here in West Yorkshire under the Harm to Hope Carol Black report that was completed, and the majority of that is about treatment, so that is a great thing. And we've got the ADDA project in Wakefield, which hopefully will really work with people who are addicted there, because we know that more people are dying in Wakefield than in many other places in the country. So there's a lot of investment coming in. Each of the localities has a Director of Public Health who is the Senior Responsible Officer, but they have all agreed to meet with me every 6 months to feedback on the work that they're doing, any opportunities for joined up working, joint commissioning. All those things will be explored to see how we can really maximise the opportunities for West Yorkshire and bring about some of that change more rapidly.
Okay, thank you. I think that brings the scrutiny of the annual report to an end, so we can move to the next agenda item.
Sorry, Chair, is that the end of point 6?
Sorry.
No, 5.
5, right, sorry.
Yes.
Sorry, just for clarification.
Okay. No, I've got you on the list. No, we're moving now to item 6, the West Yorkshire Violence Reduction Unit update. And I don't know if you want to say anything about this before we proceed to the few questions that we have.
Well, if I just may say, Chair, I know we are pushed for time because we've got item in progress. Just to say how proud I am of the VRU, what we've managed to access funding-wise, the impact that they're having on prevention and early intervention is exceptional, and they work flat out to really do what it says on the tin, reduce violence in our community. But happy to take questions, Chair.
Thank you. Yes, certainly I'm aware of some of the work of the VRU in Leeds, and I'm sure everyone is in their own districts as well. But we did have some questions. So the first one, I think, Joe, you have a question about the match funding.
Yeah, thank you for the report. It's obviously really interesting and really great to see the variety of work that's taking place. There is an increased requirement from the government in terms of the funding to secure additional match funding, and I just wondered how confident you were in terms of securing that, particularly in light of what many public sector organisations are going to be facing moving forward.
Well, but if I could say that part of the challenge, it's annoying that you're given this money, but you have to find it from somewhere else. But just to say, it doesn't have to be financial, it can be in kind as well. So there will be opportunities, certainly as the Mayor, with a real sort of team and ladle opportunity to try and work this out between all our departments, not just police and crime. But it's really important that this team get the money they need because of their impact on our society. So we will be looking at that.
Yeah, and just to say that we have raised it with the Home Office. That
it doesn't seem fair to say.
It's not fair. Many PCCs and deputy mayors have raised it with the Home Office. It just puts pressure back on policing and back on our partners. So, for example, the Harm to Hope monies, there's a requirement for match funding there, and the police are having to put in some match funding, not cash, but some of the activity that they're doing, we're using as the in-kind match funding. And it's practically every bit of money we're now getting from government has an element of match fund. Sometimes it's 5% and then it rises to 10 and then 15%. And you know, and then obviously we've just had a letter from the Home Secretary telling the police that they need to increase productivity by 20%. It's like, well, it's not increasing budgets by 20%. So, yeah, it feels like there's a bit of a mantra around numbers, percentage numbers, but there isn't a reality about actually the impact on, you know, the work that we're all really trying to do. So we want to do more, but you need to give us more to do that.
And could I just double check, Chair? We did share the letters from the Home Secretary with you and hopefully disseminated them to the panel, because I think it's helpful that you understand what the government of the day are thinking and what their expectations are of the police.
Thank you. Moving on, Councillor Smith has a question about the evaluation of the projects and the A.8.3. I'll leave you to ask the question.
Yeah, 8.3. The question really was, are you aware of, or indeed are there any projects which have had to cease due to the outcomes of the evaluation process?
I mean, I think there is something very important about evaluation. We can't just spend the cash on projects we think are going to work. Evaluation is important. It seems a substantial amount of the budget.
Yeah, exactly. But also, the evaluation is an opportunity to go back to our local partners and say, actually, this works, but we need you to fund it now. And so, for example, we're in conversations about some of the funding that we've been giving for a long time. And we're talking to CSP partners about, we'd like to give you this money, but you've also got to, you know, make this area of work improve by, you know, eventually you taking that on board in your own right. And similarly, there was a project that we were funding for many years around fraud, older abuse via fraud. There's a project we were funding for many years. We did an evaluation, and now that's being picked up by the local authorities and
concern, isn't it?
Yeah, and the police. So you use evaluations both to continue to fund, to defund, because sometimes things aren't giving you the outcomes that you want, but also then as a starting point for a conversation with other partners to pick up the funding for that work, because it becomes core to their own activities.
So at 10% it might feel like a substantial amount of money, but actually it could save us money as well, that we're not entrenched in delivering the same stuff.
Yeah, and then it helps us to get more money. So some of the evaluations we've then used to get the Safer Streets monies, because we've been able to evidence the need through the evaluations of the activities that we've been doing. So it's a great thing, and obviously intellectual knowledge is always better than no knowledge. But yeah, it's a bit of a burden, but it's very useful.
Worthwhile proof of concept, so that you can take all the projects which really are valuable.
Yeah, and everything's evidence-led with policing.
And if you're going to innovate, you need to know it's going to work.
Okay, thank you. Move on to the changes planned at B4 in Appendix 2 and talking about the male victims of domestic abuse. Councillor Clinton.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. I'd like to ask a question about the service that you offer to domestic abuse victims in the police control room. Just on the basis of equality, are men and boys still be able to access this service? Because I think we sometimes tend to forget that, you know, men and boys are susceptible to domestic abuse and violence.
I absolutely agree with you, and that's why it's important. It was an ISFA or an IDVA that is focusing absolutely on men and boys. We're not completely just looking in one direction. We know this happens across both men and women, which is why it's really important. And anybody, this is my assumption, and maybe the Chief can tell me, anybody that's in the control room will be agnostic about who's calling for help and won't be gender specific, but I'm sure the Chief will agree.
That's good to hear, thank you.
Thank you. I do have a few questions. One of which is that victim satisfaction has reduced, but could you... I'm sorry. Mr Lake, you have a question.
Yeah, I do, thanks, Chair. I mean, first of all, huge amount of cross-service working, as the Chief alluded to earlier, with lots of different agencies, massive commitment and a lot of effort going into it. I just tried to follow through on the A&E navigator function because of my background in hematology. And at 4.7 on page 7, it mentions there that the emergency data that we're getting, emergency fund data, is only from Calderdale, Leeds and Mid-Yorkshire. But I think it must include Bradford because later on you make reference to the statistics from Leeds and Bradford. So I think that might be missing off there.
That's helpful. Let's have a look at that. Thank you.
I can see how it's working. I think it's perhaps not clear when you read through the whole paper because I think Mid-Yorkshire is quoted later on as coming online this next year rather than you having the data now.
Yeah.
So it was just, I found it a little bit confusing to read through.
Right.
But the gist of it is good and clearly the performance is good and some of the facts and figures in there are extremely impressive. When you add a cost figure to it that you worked out, you know, I think so 45 less incidents, it worked out about £350,000 worth of savings to the various agencies, so it's a terrific result. Yeah. And then B63, further down, really just to say, very, very impressed with 2,000 outreach and teachable moments. An outreach to 2,000 young people between September and March is very impressive, so well done.
It's really great, isn't it? It's all about that prevention. And it's just so shocking that when a person is stabbed, it costs the NHS £7,000. Just think if we can get in before that happens, how we can help the NHS. But it is to that public health approach. We are all partners in this. So it's a great scheme and it does seem to be having good outcomes.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, I think that concludes all our questions on that particular item. Thank you very much. We will now go on to the performance management report for this quarter. And I have a few questions and then so do others. The victim satisfaction has continued to reduce and is lower than it was. I'm wondering what you're doing to make sure that that is improved.
Just to say it's on a downward trend, but the last quarter has seen a slight upturn, which is a bit of light at the end of the tunnel. But also what I found quite pleasing was that the victims of domestic abuse are amongst the most satisfied with a rate of 86.5%, which is also increasing. And as that's a focus, I am very pleased to see that. And of course, we won't sit on our laurels if victim satisfaction is continuing to go down, but there is an uptick, a slight uptick, which is to be welcome.
Thank you. There is an increase in the number of victims and suspects who are flagged as at risk of child criminal exploitation. And last time you explained this was part of early intervention work, which the more you intervene, the more reports go up, and that is obviously a good thing because these things are not being hidden. But I am wondering whether you expect this to level off as the figure has increased by about 40% on year to date.
Yeah, because it's not just the police who are the people who are registering their concerns about young people. It's many, many different partners. And as partners are getting better trained, more aware of risk factors, I think the numbers will continue to increase for some time. And it's only at the point when all the work that we're doing together, obviously we had a massive investment in safeguarding and policing. We've got lots of changes happening across West Yorkshire with the review of the MASH arrangements, but also other local authorities, and Bradford in particular, undergoing some big changes in regards to how they look after young people. So all these things have to work themselves through to get to a position where everyone is feeling as though together as one, understanding the same things, at the same level of understanding about what risk looks like. But actually I'm really pleased that we're identifying more young people who are potentially at risk, because it means that we're being really proactive. We're looking at every child as an individual. We're not looking at the bottom line thinking, oh, there's too many, let's not put any more in because there's too many. They're looking at need rather than their own resources, and we have to do more to get the resources in to address this issue together as a system. It's not just about policing. So I can't answer the question. I'd like to think the numbers would reverse, but there are a lot of predatory people out there, and I think that it's about they're the cause of the increase. It's not about us increasing these numbers because we fancy it. There are a lot of predatory people, and we need to be working together as a society to address the evil that's amongst us.
And also, once we know those numbers, we can intervene in those young people's lives, stop the trauma, support them, so then the cycle doesn't continue and we get even further, greater numbers in 10 years' time, 15 years' time. We've got to get in at the beginning and identifying where these young people are, wrapping services around them to make sure that they have a decent life going forward. It's really, really important. But we won't sit on our laurels and just say it's because people are just able to report. We will always interrogate the numbers to make sure why this is happening. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. So, I understand the challenges, and I understand the different. So, you increase awareness, you make it easier to report, the numbers go up, etc. So, there's got to be a piece around measuring the outcomes and the success from those reporting, rather than focusing on the actual numbers reporting. But then you've got the preventative measures feeding into that. And I'm just wondering, is there a longer term vision as to when that work on the preventative measures starts to feed into reducing reported?
Well, just to your point about the numbers increasing, we have seen, haven't we, with social media and phones in young people's hands, this is where such a majority of the work, the problem starts with young people. So we are going to see rises because of the access to it. But if you wanted to talk about the long term.
And we're not talking about the same young people. So because these young people have been flagged as potentially at risk, lots of work goes on with those young people. And so some of those young people will come out off of that list over a period of time, and new people will enter. So it's an iterative process. So it's not about all these young people, they're on this list and they stay on this list forever, because working together with local authorities, education, youth services, third sector, VIU interventions, all the rest of it, as young people go on, so too do young people come off. But then new people are replacing those numbers. And obviously we give you all the numbers, we give you the people who have come on, and the people who are left, we're not doing a minus 1,500 that came off in month 16 or whatever it is. So I think it's a good thing that more and more young people who are at risk are being identified, because then that partnership wraparound approach that the Mayor's talked about can take place. I think what we need to be asking is how many people are coming off that list, how many, because I think that's really important, and maybe it's not a metric in the plan, because we were more interested in the prevention, but actually the early intervention and prevention. So we also need to understand how effective the activity, the partnership activity, it's not literally, most of that is not the police, most of that is other partners. But we need to understand how many people are coming off that list, so we can get a better understanding of the effectiveness of the interventions that are taking place.
That's a good suggestion. Wendy wanted to come in just to add.
Just to say, we've put it in as a police and crime plan measure because HMI CFRS flagged that across the country there was not an understanding of these young people and who were at risk and who were not. So we put it in as a measure in the plan with the idea that we wanted it to go up. Because we wanted to make sure we were flagging everybody. But you're right, it needs to then be evaluated across the whole of West Yorkshire to see what's happening.
Supplementary, yes. So I think the other strand to that line of questioning was sort of long-term ambitions, and you know, what does good look like in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, and how we measure our success on that long-term trajectory?
Chair, just in relation to that, there's a document produced across policing called the Force Management Statement, which talks about that long-term strategic approach to crime reduction and predictions of figures, and CSE, CSEA, CCE, all these terms which we'll discuss later are in there. And I suppose the answer to the question that I think you're seeking to get is, if we take the example of the missing from home, the graph was going like that. Of the interventions of a partnership approach and all that we've done in West Yorkshire, it's going like that. It's still going up, and it's still young people being missing, but we've suppressed it and changed the demand. The same thing is happening with CSEA. So the long-term 10-year trajectory is going like that, but because of the interventions we've done with local authorities and partners, it's coming down. So I'll draw you to the next Force Management Statement, which gives you that 10-year prediction as to where we're going with things. Of course, the overall objective is to reduce the number of young people who are sexually or criminally exploited and abused. Of course it is. But we're reflecting what's going on in society, and there's got to be some pragmatism about it all. It's about minimisation and reduction at the same time.
John, is it possible to send members the latest Force Management Statement so you can understand how that works? And it's award-winning, by the way.
We'll circulate to the previous people. We'll circulate it because there's a lot of new members, and there's executive summary, and then there's 350 pages of it. So,
I think potentially the executive summary will be the most read.
Okay, happy. Councillor Carter, you wanted to come in?
Yes, thank you. You're right, there's a lot more access these days for kids, and there's a lot more chance of them being harmed through the internet. The police are not the only body who are there to safeguard children. It's also children's services, the local authorities and the NHS. Are you happy you are getting the right support from those agencies? Is there more that can be done in that area?
So obviously they're not supporting me, they're supporting the police.
Yeah.
And Tracy and I have regular conversations with the Chief Constable about how is that partnership working, are there any blockages you'd like us to intervene on, and actually the missing was one of the areas where police said actually we would really appreciate some support here, and Tracy took that to the leaders to talk about what we could do next, and as a result of that the police and the directors of children's services, not just in West Yorkshire but nationally, are in conversation about some of the issues related to missing young people. One of the reasons why some of the numbers are starting to reduce. Actually our temporary Deputy Chief Constable leads nationally on missing, and so some of the lessons that are being learned nationally she's bringing here to West Yorkshire and helping all the partnerships to work better together. And I think we've raised here before, we've talked about children's homes, unregulated children's homes where Ofsted doesn't come along to inspect, and how we're trying to do some work there. Leeds doing some brilliant stuff, because I've spoken to Fiona Venner, who's the Exec Board Member for Children's Services, about what they're doing to inform some of the work that the rest of West Yorkshire can do. So some brilliant relationships. We're always offering, Tracy and I, to have conversations where there are barriers. Fortunately, we've not needed to do that, but we are working together with the police and with the leaders to keep children as safe as possible.
But if I can add as well that community groups who work in this space are supported by the Mayor's Community Safety Fund, which is the COCA money, the proceeds of crime. And last night we had the most amazing celebration of that money, over £350,000, £360,000 was given out to 61 organisations, because they know their community, they know these young people, and they can intervene early on. So we're trying all angles, and certainly the ability for young people to come into our region unknown by councils and be vulnerable in our region, and those young people being moved around is a real worry for me, and also unregulated children's homes, and I've raised it with leaders and will continue to do what we can to make sure that when a child goes into care, it's like a parent. It has to be proper care that is has the oversight and protects them from exploitation.
Just a quick supplementary.
So just one last, there are very positive, partnerships across West Yorkshire. I'm really satisfied about the engagement and the partnership approach that we have in the parameters of what we got. I'm really satisfied. I've got no criticism or issues with any of the partners in West Yorkshire, and I'd like to think they feel the same for us. A step outside West Yorkshire, there's a bigger societal issue going on here. The front line of policing would not forgive me for not raising the issue with. We have become the service of last resort. So, most of you are counsellors, and you have children's homes and directors of children's services. You have nobody working nights to look after those children. You've got one person on call. So when they go missing, there's no parental oversight and responsibility. They ring the police. You also have oversight around health and social care and other issues. And when there's mental health and social care issues, there's nobody there to go and help those people. So they come to the police. So we do our job and we do our duty and we safeguard people. But then I come to panels like this and I get asked around, well, I'm not reducing crime or doing more about antisocial behaviour and all those other things that the public think we're doing. But we're actually doing other work. So you've seen recent reports that 64% of policing work is not about crime reduction. It's around safeguarding. It's the right thing to do, but it's not what the public are expecting us to be doing, but we've got to do it. So that's not a criticism of any partner agency in West Yorkshire. It's just the state that society is getting itself into, that there's nobody else going to do that work, so we do it. So we then can't do the stuff that the public think we should be doing, and then we get doubly criticised. And that's why the front line are kind of up against it, saying, well, we're going from a mental health issue to missing from home episode, and then, quite rightly, we're picking up other issues around domestic abuse, which is us and crime related, but then we're getting criticised for not doing our job properly. And I was just making the point, I think you all know it, you share it, but the partnership is brilliant across West Yorkshire, but we're spending far too much time doing things that I don't think the public think are called policing roles, but we've got to do them because nobody else will do it. Thank you, Chair.
I'm sure we all appreciate the enormous workload that falls upon the shoulders of the police force, and hopefully that the recruitment of more officers will make that workload slightly more bearable and practical.
We welcome it. It'll take us back to 2010 levels, but the expectations are still higher than that.
Yes, the expectations are very high. I think you wanted to come in.
I did, just to very briefly, I suppose, echo the Chief's words around partnerships and so on, but just to also mention that a lot of this stuff is cyclical, and one of the things that is really important, especially with young people who are often vulnerable and missing, is that when we intervene, and perhaps we're not the best people to do that, that then sometimes criminalises young people, brings them into contact with police officers in situations that we wouldn't want them to be. That then has a knock-on impact into how those young people see the police, which then has a knock-on impact to confidence and how much intelligence we get from them. So it's a cyclical thing. And so I suppose getting that right care from the right person at the right time is critical. It's not always the best place for the police to attend some of those incidents, I suppose, is what I feel.
Thank you. I know Councillor Cooper.
Well, I want to move on to sort of road traffic accidents.
Oh, you wanted the next thing. Is this on this topic?
Yeah, just in relation to responsibilities around care experience young people and the ultimate over-representation in the criminal justice system, I think it's worth the panel noting that National Youth Advisory Service recently wrote to all PCCs, having done an analysis of the 43 police and crime plans across the country, and only 8 of them actually mentioned activity around care experience and looked after children. And I think the partnership work that the Mayor and Deputy Mayor and Chief Constable have referenced really bodes well, but that doesn't, that is a huge challenge. And the fact that organisations like NYAS are writing to PCCs to expect them to do more work around it just shows the level of pressure that the system is under. And the end game in this is where my professional career is, about the over-representation of looked after children in custody. and how many of those instances could have been prevented by the type of work that the Deputy Chief mentioned. So I think it is definitely an area that we need to be grateful that our Police and Crime Plan does reference care experience, but also acknowledge that that's not the situation nationally. And we see that in those children who come to us from outside of the area and placed in children's homes.
Okay, yeah. Thank you. I had a couple of questions, but I'm going to send them to you because they're quite factual and I'm very conscious of time. And we've still got quite a lot to be done. So,
Chair, can I just jump in? I wasn't going to ask this question, but we discussed it earlier, but just on page 17, about, and it's something maybe you can bring back at a later meeting. I'm not sure the statistics we have enable us to follow through on the recruitment. So under the mayoral pledge, we've got recruit 624 new police officers from 20 and 22. The statistics we have on 17, and I'm trying to follow that through how we do, just tell me the total number of officers in the course. I can't actually see how many have been recruited. So you may have recruited more or less.
I think it's written in the report, isn't it?
Yeah, and there's a bit missing further down at 3.1, 3.10. About makes a reference to it, but doesn't have anything detailed. So it might be helpful next time if we can have a detail showing joiners, leavers, kind of net movement. That would be helpful.
Yeah, not a problem.
And just a point of accuracy, I think the number on PCSOs change. I think that should be plus 24, not minus 49.
yes, you're right. Yeah, sorry. Thank you. Thorough as always. Close scrutiny to the detail of the report. Thank you. So moving on to section 3, safer places and thriving communities. And we did have a question on this.
Was this in respect of, was that a general question on the justice system, or is that related to Vision Zero?
Later on. I may have, no, I know. It's, I think it was yourself. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair.
Yes, this is the general question,
Yeah.
but this is the specific one. Councillor Thornburg.
Thank you. It's regarding the West Yorkshire Police delivery. While, Operation Genlock, it's coming up with some impressive results regarding taking weapons off the street. My question is, what's been done to sort of stem the flow of these weapons actually getting onto the streets in the first place? I understand it's difficult with knives. Knives can be, kitchen utensils or the case, but such as guns and everything else, these are readily available in this country. Can you just sort of elaborate on what's been done to sort of stop the flow of them getting onto the streets in the first place?
Thank you, Councillor. And because of what happened in the tragic murder in Kirklees, we did have a closer look at knife crime and knives in particular. And knife crime in Kirklees specifically is reduced by 5.9% over the last 12 months. But your point about taking knives off the street, I think that's where Gemlock really does come into its own. And it's been absolutely the driving force to reduce knife-related crimes and bring those people to justice who have it. But your point is absolutely right, that you can take a knife from the kitchen, or you can turn your ruler, as we heard about a young girl only yesterday, take a ruler in school and split it and turn that into a sharp weapon and then sell it in your class. So I think it's that acknowledgement that it's not just knives coming in, the zombie knives from abroad through Amazon or through older people, but it is available everywhere. But if you want to come in on what Gemlock have been doing.
What West Yorkshire Police more widely have been doing. So, for example, we knew that through intelligence that was coming in from young people who had been stopped with knives, from crimes that had been committed, West Yorkshire Police in Leeds recognised that a source of many of these knives was a place called Fantasia, which it's been in the press, I'm not breaching any confidentialities, which West Yorkshire Police worked with Leeds City Council to close down that shop, and they searched through the law books to find the right legislation, because actually the legislation is not fit for purpose. It doesn't give police the powers and local authorities the powers to close down shops selling huge, massive machetes and knives. And if you go to the Royal Armouries, you'll see some of those knives, because at the sharp end is still on show, which is the VRU and not Gemlock. I've got an exhibition of all some of the knives that were taken off the streets. You'll see that some of them are just absolutely ridiculous. But Fantasia and others like Fantasia across the country were selling these knives. And we know that young people were buying these knives illegally. So they did a lot of work to close down that business, working with Leeds City Council. So that's one of the ways that they seek to reduce access. I know that the NPCC, the National Police Chiefs Council, they've written to some of the manufacturers, the Amazons of this world, about how easy it is for young people to get access to knives. I was given some knives as a birthday present, and I had to give my name, my date of birth when they dropped it off. But it's very easy for people to get adults to do that for them. So it's a really, really difficult thing for the police to do. But they're trying these really innovative and creative ways to do that. But ultimately, if somebody wants a bladed article, it doesn't have to be a knife. It can be anything that they've created themselves. And there are, knives in every kitchen drawer.
And I think just to reference, and I'm sure the Chief will probably pick this up, that using Section 60 powers, as Alison spoke about earlier, that once there is a serious incident, that you could put more patrols into those hot spots and allow officers to carry out those increased stop and searches to identify if there's one person carrying a knife, they're doing it because they're potentially afraid. So there will, because of others maybe carrying knives, so that's an opportunity to use powers to get in and to clear that area of anybody that is carrying a knife. But it is a worry that knives, bladed instruments, can be anything and everything, can't they?
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Is this where you had your...
I've got a couple of sort of general questions, if I may. I just wonder if the Mayor would consider whether it may be possible, in respect of speeding enforcement on unclassified roads, to consider whether she can would think it would be a good idea to investigate whether local authorities could be delegated some powers to deal with speeding. So the sort of big picture idea is, on unclassified roads, if council officers could be given more powers of enforcement, it would relieve pressure from the police and perhaps enable more nimble enforcement to improve road safety.
I'm not sure what
I don't
think about that.
I think it's a fantastic idea.
I'm worried about councillors now and council officers worried about stopping people and saying, oh, you're not the police, you can't tell us whether we can go faster.
I know it's not something that can be done, but I'm just...
Yeah, we love innovation, so let's look into it.
Thank you. And the other sort of general point was, much as with the NHS, which has a whole system pressure which seems to be articulated by very specific symptoms. We seem to have a whole pressure system with the criminal justice system as well. So all good and well, the police doing a fantastic job, and all the third sector organisations in prevention and actual prosecutions, but when there is such a gap at the moment, given all the pressures that have been on the criminal justice system and the action by barristers, etc., when there's such a gap between the police actually trying to bring somebody to justice and then the resulting court appearance and sanctions that come out of that being so far in the future, is there anything that the Mayor can do to petition, use influence, use delegate powers to ensure that the most serious crimes are being prosecuted in a timely fashion, and that appropriate attention is given to this whole system problem.
There's no doubt about it, that is one of the biggest challenges and the biggest frustration, that the work goes on, you get somebody that could potentially go to court, and then it's delayed or the evidence falls away because the criminal justice system is it's just not fit for purpose. But that's why we're trying to do interventions, so whether that's recording victims' evidence in the spokes outside of the court, so that in Wakefield and elsewhere you can go and give your evidence and that evidence is captured. That's an innovative way, and we're leading on that approach. And I think the ISFAs and IDVAs, that we've got 25 more, trying to keep people focused on trying to get the right outcome without falling away like, well, it's going to be 2 years, I need to get my life together, I just can't continue. So we need to make sure that they're supported through this torturous process. Now, we've got better outcomes for convictions in court than some regions. It's still not good enough. I am continually making representations to the Home Secretary. I mean, they're always changing, so it's quite frustrating that there's so much churn.
It's the impact on the deterrent effect as well, isn't it?
That's right, because people think they can get away with it. And that's why I'm really pleased that our numbers for good outcomes for rape in particular are better than the national average. But still, it's still not good enough. It is the system that works against us. It's also so bad for morale for the officers, because they've worked so hard constructing a case, and then it falls apart because of the backlog or whatever. We still have the Nightingale Court, don't we?
Yeah.
Which is trying to take some of that, take some of the pressure. But it is poor, and we're still making representations. Alison?
Yeah, so because I chair the local criminal justice board, we get a lot of data about what's actually happening in the whole criminal justice system pathway. I can't remember the data, but I think we do really well on the numbers of victims who drop the case before it gets to court. It's still very high, but we're lower than other forces. I think we're the first. I think we're number one in the John's. So I've remembered that, and it's quite substantial, the number, the difference that we've got compared to other forces. So all those interventions the Mayor's just mentioned are working in keeping victims engaged, and also things like mobile phones were identified as a big area for people to drop cases when they were going to lose the phones. West Yorkshire Police has been working to get all the data off phones within 24 hours. We're now looking at going to people's homes. We need some software to do that, but getting that software so we can actually go to victims' homes, download the mobile phones there. All this stuff is about preventing people dropping out, but the length of time it takes for the CPS to make a decision, for example, for the court system to actually give somebody a date, and then it's cancelled. So the rate for cancellations is enormous. Again, I can't remember the exact detail, but I can send you the latest dashboard so you can see that it's public, so you can have a look at it and you can see how we compare to others. But the rate of cancellation is phenomenal. So people turn up and don't know until they get there that it's been cancelled. All that stuff means that justice delayed is justice denied, and we really need to doing more at a national level. The barrister strike is yet another problem. It's not the problem, it's the systemic issue about cost of living crisis at the heart of that, of course, but we need to be working together as a one system and put victims at the heart. I think we already in the BBC, about a 13-year-old girl has just been told she now needs to wait 4, not 3 years, to get her rape trial to court. So, when you read that, it just goes to show you that the system is broken.
I think we've all got, as councils, got examples of from speaking to local policing teams. It's really frustrating. Yeah.
Sure, I will be brief, but I will talk about criminal justice. I can't, but everything that's been said is right. We're now listing trials for August 2024. There's nothing been listed in the Crown Courts before that. That's not their fault. That's down to the national funding of the Crown Courts. The magistrates' courts are a lot better, but as the Deputy Mayor has alluded to, I'm firmly of the belief that the criminal justice system is not fit for purpose.
Yes.
You will all know, won't you, that the domestic abuse victims we arrested last night and the young boys in possession of knives and the people who've threatened to kill other people. You know, don't you, that we can't charge them. That we're not allowed to charge them. For the last 2 years, we've had the right to charge them whilst they're in custody now, taken away from us. So the only way we can charge somebody is for remanding them into custody. Everybody else, all those people who've assaulted their partners last night, who've been caught in the possession of knives, or who have committed other offences, now have to be bailed. They have to be released. So what message does that send to victims and witnesses? Policing, throughout its whole history, has always charged people when there's prima facie evidence there and then. The public want us to do that, but for the last 2 years in this society we've had that ability taken away from us because the CPS haven't got the funding to give us the charging advice. So immediately that lets victims and witnesses down and starts what we would describe as the attrition process. It starts the long slog of the process. So we work really hard and get what we can together and put the file in. But immediately I think we're losing victims and witnesses support because they're not seeing positive action. And guess what they're looking at? They're looking at the people in the uniforms. So we're pleading nationally, and the Mayor is helping us with this and the Deputy Mayor, to say, if you can't service that, just give us the right to charge back. We used to do it. You know, trust us to do it, and we'll do it properly. So from the beginning there, the very first golden hour, the first 24 hours, right the way through to weeks, months, years later when we get people to court and then it's delayed, the whole thing is just out of kilter and not working on behalf of victims. It's process orientated rather than victim orientated. And something's got to change nationally, and I'm grateful for your support on it, but some of these decisions are national, and the agencies hide behind a national decision. So it's yet another one where the police are kind of in the crossfire for not doing enough around supporting people. Yeah, our hands are tied behind our back. Our officers are desperately wanting to charge those people because they need to be going to court in front of magistrates. Second intervention, I do apologise, Chair.
Okay, so it's very frustrating.
Thank you.
Very difficult situation. Thank you for your question. That completes all the questions that we have.
Yeah.
Councillor Cooper.
So on the children seriously injured on roads, a really serious uptake, 414 additional from 21 to 2020. And serious injuries can be everything from a broken leg to the tragedy of somebody being in a vegetative state in bed for possibly the rest of their lives. And so that figure, I think, it's a tragedy for the people who are concerned, but also it's going to be a huge cost to public services going ahead. So you've got new staff coming in, being advertised to come in October 2020 to come in to do the work to help support Vision Zero. When do you think would be an appropriate time for them to come and tell us what action they're going to be taking to help try and reduce that figure?
Yeah. There won't be an appropriate time for them to come because we come and tell you because you hold us to account, not our staff.
Okay.
So, so obviously we're here. We can talk to you at any point. Once we've got the team in place, we're really happy to answer any questions. We can put Vision Zero on as a paper.
I think that's a good idea because obviously it's a concern for everyone. Yeah. So let's have an update.
6 months hence, give them a chance to get into place.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah, sounds like a good idea.
And we'll have them here, but you'll be asking us.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. That's fine.
Yeah, good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I think that does now complete the questions and comments on that particular item. So let's go on to item 8, the investigations and outcomes report. I'm conscious of time. Is there anything you wish to say about this before we go straight into the questions?
There's just one area, Chair, that the safeguarding review at 3.0. It's really good to see this has been completed and the recommendations acted on promptly. And this type of work can also affect officers involved. So the focus on well-being, Chair, is really vital because we don't want those officers to burn out because of the stuff they have to deal with on a daily basis. So
absolutely.
I just want to thank everyone involved in that.
Thank you. Councillor Smith, you had a question on the assessments, didn't you?
I did indeed, and I just thought, the panel thought it may be useful to understand more about whether victims are feeling better supported as a result of the work and how this is going to be measured.
We answered, that was in a previous paper, wasn't it? Victim satisfaction.
Because that was global. Can you tell us
where was it in the papers?
Actual reference. Yes, it's there. It's the recommendations from HMIC FRS. As a result of that, the Mayor has a performance measure in the policing crime plan to increase the percentage of crimes with effective initial needs assessment. And the assessment is intended to determine if the victim needs support and establish the support, assess the vulnerability. It was reported that in the performance monitoring report in July that this has increased to 97%. But how it's, I think the question was that you've just asked how it's being measured.
Correct.
I'm so sorry, Chair. Would you mind just pointing us to, we can't seem to identify what you're looking at. Which point is it in the investigations?
What
and
I've
outcomes
done is
paper?
make notes rather than...
We're all looking at...
If we try to identify
I'm
what
sure.
we're referring to,
I'm
and
sure.
struggling
Shall we...
with-
is there a way that we can find at the point that that goes to...
Was it a broader question, Councillor?
2.7.
Chair, I think we might have an answer for it.
I think really it's a general question.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Yeah, I think the Chief Constable's got a response in any event, and it's their paper, so that's
It's a
great.
broad question.
So DCI Vanessa Smith has joined us at the table. She's soon to become a detective superintendent, but she'll answer this because she understands and led on much of this work.
Thank you.
Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning. The VNA, the Victim Needs Assessment, which was previously called the INA, is measured weekly by our performance team. That's measured through our niche computer system, which is where we record all crime, and that's measured, and we've now increased to 97%, so we are addressing that, which we are recording all of the Victims Needs Assessment, which is a fantastic figure. 97%.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, that
Sorry
was
about
it.
the confusion.
Sorry. Yes. Apologies for the confusion. It was a more broad question. There's. I think I'll. Again, I think what I was going to ask has really been covered. So I'll go to Mr. Lake, who had an overall comment on
Yeah,
this.
thanks. Yeah, an overall very good report, lots of activity, lots of actions as we would expect. It's really just to follow up to say, I think it would be useful to get some of the feedback. There's clearly a lot of training going on, a lot of training planned, a lot of various operations and activities going on. For example, in the safeguarding section of under point 3, it's good to see that the staffing has been increased, but then the sort of comments say we should see some of the inexperience issues mitigated. You know, we should increase, we should see this. It would be useful, I think, to see some outcomes or progress against your projected outcomes at a later meeting, just to give us an update as to how that's working. Lots of activity, great paper, you know, absolutely focused on what you need to do there. So it just would be useful at a later date if we could agenda in perhaps for an update on some of those progress against the outcomes.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions from anyone who wants to come up there? No? Okay. Fine. So we'll go on to the Mayor's response to any current issues. And Councillor Carter, you had a question here, didn't you?
I did, Chair, but actually it's been inadvertently answered. It was about the police attending all burglaries.
Yes, we've been doing that for years, and it's great that we're always leading the rest of the country, so it's good to see.
Well, congratulations to the Chief Officer again, because that was an excellent peer report, and we do appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, and I know we'll return to this item because the councillor is temporarily absent from the room. So we'll go on to the published.
The Mayor has
The Mayor's new response to our issues.
If I could celebrate something, the video that you saw around domestic servitude, I don't know if you managed to have a look at it, but that is a West Yorkshire company called Fettle, I think they're called, and they're Fettle, and they've been nominated for a Royal Television Society Yorkshire Award for that animation. So I'm really pleased that that's had the longevity that is beyond just our campaign, but is recognised as really top-notch. So just a couple of things, that we took part in a brilliant Vogue co-production event in Wakefield, bringing together so many different parties, and the results will be seen in the Safety of Women and Girls strategy, which we're launching next month. And as I mentioned yesterday, we had the highest amount awarded from the proceeds of crime money to our community groups, and launched the next round with even more money. And I'm going to challenge whoever can make this happen. If we had more people in this team, could we get more money, do you think, Chief? Because this team is incredibly good at identifying criminals' ill-gotten gains and then giving it back to the communities that are harmed. So we launched our next round, so please, in your communities, make sure people are aware that this money is available, and we've raised the amount from 6,000 maximum to 8,000, reflecting the cost of living crisis. In sadder news, the tragic stabbing of the young schoolboy in Kirklees obviously has brought knife crime to the fore, and the Deputy Mayor completed a number of interviews on local media, the latest one, Radio Leeds, on Monday, just to talk about what we're doing and Operation Gemlock. And also, Alice and I are really pleased to mark Black History Month in October, and very proud that Alison's become the patron of Aspire, which is an education programme tackling racial disparity. So some positive stuff there, but obviously it is tragic that young people are losing their lives because of knife crime. Yes. So thank you all very much.
Thank you. And Councillor Sakor,
yeah.
You had a question specifically
regarding
that last item, didn't you?
You might know, recently there was a headline in the social media regarding rising knife-related crime in schools. Yeah? As a result, some young people have lost their life as well recently, not too long ago. As a local councillor, I have spoken to quite a few parents, the parents who are worried about their safety of their children, and some parents are not happy even to send their some school where these incidents have been happening. My question is, as a mayor, deputy mayor, or the police, how you would ensure or give assurance to parents their children would be safe in their schools?
Well, thank you. But specifically around Kirklees, I was a Member of Parliament in Batley and Spen, and to provide reassurance to the public is part of our role as leaders. But I want to reassure you that particularly in that school, and you'll know, Councillor, because this is your patch, that we commissioned St Giles Trust, which are already in the school, and we have a member of St Giles Trust seconded onto our delivery team. The VRU have also focused the deterrence car, which you'll have heard about earlier, deploying in Kirklees, as well as giving Operation Gemlock a bit of an uplift capacity-wise. And also in Kirklees, since the start of April, West Yorkshire Police have taken 67 bladed implements off the streets in Kirklees and made 222 arrests. Now, some of those arrested are in custody, awaiting court proceedings, and in the last 12 months in Kirklees, there's been a 5.9% reduction in knife-related offences and 17% reduction in the most serious assaults involving weapons. So I can't reassure parents, I'm a parent myself, that bad things won't happen to your children, but what I will do is I can reassure the parents across West Yorkshire that we are doing everything in our power to make sure that our communities are safe for young people.
And is it worth just saying, picking up on the Chief Constable's point, that this is not a police issue in, isolation. This is a society issue. This is a parent issue, a school issue, and we all need to be working together, because once a child crosses the threshold into school, the school has got a huge responsibility for keeping those young people safe, for the education that they're delivering in that school, for the safety measures that they've got in place. But mums and dads, parents and people responsible for parental responsibility, they've got a role in helping their children to understand that carrying a knife is not the right thing to do, keeping their child safe, raising issues appropriately. We've got to work with local authorities, we've got to work with youth services, the third sector. So all of us have got a role to play. The police are doing a lot, and some of it is not strictly their job, but they're doing it because they believe in early intervention and prevention too. PolEd talks about knife crime. PolEd, one of the courses that the police are funding. No one's giving them the money for that, by the way. They're funding it independently because they believe in educating young people, and knife crime and holding a knife is part of that delivery programme. And I think the police are doing so much more than other forces are doing, and we all need to step up. All of us, I'm a mum, all of us need to be stepping up and making sure that our children understand that there's a different way.
And also, if I could just thank Huddersfield Town Football Club for their intervention in this space, because obviously they're with young people all the time, and they're working with the positive education against knives that was set up in 2019, and them and West Yorkshire Police have worked with children in more than 13 schools across the district and really positively received. So we're doing all we can. If you have more ideas, please come to us. If you have community organisations that could do with extra funding, they can apply for the Mayor's Community Safety money. We'll do all we can, because it's an absolute tragedy that someone loses their life through a knife.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that question. I think it was a very timely question to ask at the moment, and that to find out what is being done is also really useful. So, unless anyone else wants to say anything about current issues, we'll go on to the next item of the agenda, which is the published key decisions. And that's really for noting that they are there. I just wondered how long it takes for the outcomes to be available of the decisions, usually.
Decisions from this panel? From those decisions.
This is a general question,
Yeah.
it's not a specific question about one decision or another decision, and how that affects your work. I mean, I can imagine it varies, of course.
Yeah, they're all different.
What do you mean by the outcomes from the decisions? Do you mean how long it takes between a decision being taken and it being published on the website?
Well, no, how long it then takes for the implementation to take place. It was a general question that we discussed in our meeting before.
It may vary,
It varies hugely. So it depends, because on here you've got some decisions which are relating to kind of funding to take place over a 12-month period. You've got contract changes that will be implemented as soon as they're signed. You've just got a huge variety. So and it is a very transparent process because there's a huge range of decisions here, from relatively small contract changes and leases and so on, right through to major programs, and each decision has its own kind of merits and outcomes related to it. So that just varies a lot.
It will vary a lot.
Yes.
So some of the outcomes might come back to this panel, but
absolutely.
be reported on at some future point.
Indeed. And in the process, so for instance, you've had some questions today about the research and evaluation of the violence reduction unit. So they come through the papers. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Just making sure that nothing gets lost in the middle of it.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much. So we'll go on to item 11, the agreed actions log. I don't think we had anything specific to say about that unless you do. No? The forward agenda plan is for information, we know what's going on. I understand going to item 13, there's been no complaints recorded.
It's always very reassuring, Chair, when you say that.
Yes. So that's good news. So item 14 is the budget report about the expenses of this specific panel. I don't think any of us have any particular questions on that one. So again, any other business? I'd just like to say, reverting to what you said about the animated film, please pass on our congratulations to the production company. Was it, did you say Fettel? Yes.
They're actually a BAFTA award-winning company as well, so they've won awards in the past.
Yeah, I used to run there.
Oh, of course you did, yes.
Fantastic. I'm very pleased to hear it. And that's really good. And again, congratulations to the Deputy Mayor for your new role. So, any other business before we go into our closed session? No? So the date and time of our next meeting is the Friday the 4th of November, and we will be upstairs on the 3rd floor on that day. So prepare to speak fairly clearly because the acoustics are not as good as they are here. Thank you. Okay, that means the live stream is now concluding. Thank you very much to everyone.